Hey folks, it's Sam, and I'm here on Thursday, June 15th at 2 p.m. talking about retrograde planets. We have some big retrograde planets ahead. Saturn is going to go retrograde on June 17th. That's, in a couple days, tomorrow and the next day. And Saturn has been stationary retrograde, which means kind of feels like things have been brought to a halt a little bit recently because of Saturn stopping in the sky. And then within about a month, we're going to have Venus retrograde aspecting Saturn. Again, that's a pretty big thing, pretty big deal there. And then we're going to have, within a month after that, Mercury goes retrograde. You see Saturn, Mercury, and Venus will be retrograde. And then shortly after that, Venus turns direct, but then Jupiter goes retrograde. So again, this is in September. So there's big shifts ahead with these retrograde energies, and that's what I'm going to be talking about today.
Please like, share, and subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube to get notified of new videos and live streams. Also, leave a comment, share it with others on Facebook, Twitter, or other social media platforms.
Yeah, so here we are. First, we want to talk about what do retrograde planets do? What are they? Retrograde planets appear to be moving backwards in the sky relative to where we are on Earth. And they're akin to, like, if you're driving down the road and you pass a slower moving car, that car appears to be moving backwards. Now, it's not. It's still going forward, but it's not going forward as fast as you are. So it appears to go backward. And if you were, going somewhere with that person, and let's say their car wasn't able to keep up with yours, you'd have to be waiting. You'd be checking back, looking at that car to see, to check on them to make sure they're okay, because they're not keeping up with the speed of your car, let's say, or of your life. So when planets go retrograde in the sky, again, the sky, what I'm looking at now are the influences that we're all dealing with, okay? It's not your chart. Try to get a difference between your chart and the sky we're all living under. Your chart is how you tend to see things, and many of us have retrograde planets in our chart, in our birth chart when we were born, so that energy tends to be going backwards and not moving as fast as the rest of our life. So if you have natal planets in your chart when you were born that were retrograde, they tend to have that quality. They tend to be moving backwards and not moving as fast as the rest of your life. So you have to keep paying attention to them to sort of bring them along, right? But what I'm talking about now are universal energies that we're all dealing with. So Saturn is retrograde about half the time, about 5 months of the year. Jupiter is retrograde about 4 months of the year. And then Venus goes retrograde about every 2 years. And then Mercury goes retrograde like 3 times a year for a few weeks. So we know when these cycles are going to happen because they're related to the proximity of the planets and the Earth. So planets go retrograde when they're closest to the Earth. And then opposite that is what's called combustion, which happens when planets are further away from the Earth. And I recently taught a course on retrograde and combust planets. I am offering a 50% discount on that course right now. But in that course, I talked about, it said, why are you stuck in some patterns but burning through others? This is kind of the difference between retrograde and combust. Retrograde, we tend to hang out in that back and forth story, even like a confusing story. But then retrograde, when planets are but then combustion, when planets are behind the sun, they're moving as fast as they could be. We tend to move through those things too quickly. So retrograde and combustion are really important, and I taught a full course on that, and I use the analogy, especially of retrograde. There's a story about the thirsty crow, and it's a really powerful story that illustrates the nature of retrograde planets. And again, we have Saturn is about to go retrograde now, and then Venus is coming retrograde in about a month, and then Mercury, and then Jupiter. But the thirsty crow comes upon a pitcher, with water at the bottom. Now, the water at the bottom is beyond the reach of its beak, so it can't get the water, and it's thirsty, right? So it tries to push the pitcher over, but it can't do it because then the water would spill and it could drink it. But then what it does is the bird goes and gets pebbles and drops the pebbles into the pitcher. And then by the time it does that, the water level rises, and then the crow can drink the water. So retrograde planets are kind of like this, where we have to keep going back. We have a problem, an obstacle. Something is there, but it's not, it's hard for us to access it. So it shows obstacles. And again, the retrograde planets can be like this. We have to persevere through difficulties in order to succeed. The bird has to keep going back and forth in order to arrange the stones properly. And he had to figure out a way to make it work, and he had to be clever about that thing. So maybe this bird would have, Venus or Saturn retrograde too, because it's water and it's work, right? Had to go back, and when Venus thing shows up, let's say, which is like the water and drinking the water, right? Drinking the juice of life, he would have obstacles. So he's got to figure it out. He's got to, okay, if I want to drink this water, I have to go work for it, work hard for it, right? Which is pick up stones and keep dropping it in the water. But then the sweet success comes eventually after many tries and attempts and experiments. The bird is able to drink the water, and it probably tastes sweeter just for having done all of that work. So one of the great things about retrograde planets is they're very rewarding, and they're considered a source of strength in Vedic astrology because they force us to go back and put an intense focus on those areas of life. Now, as you can see here on this page, this class was already taught October the 9th, but it was taught live, but you get the class recordings now for a great discount. And if you go there, look over all the details on the page, but you can also just click here to join the class. And then there's a button that says register now. And then when you go there, you go to a checkout page, and then you just enter this coupon 50 off retro at the bottom, see? And then it takes off the price, and you get $50 off, because it's normally $97, and it's for like 20 hours of classes. Amazing bonus classes and whatnot as well. But these retrograde planets are so important to teaching us the power of patience, perseverance, and anyone who has retrograde planets in their natal chart. Again, I have Saturn retrograde, and as I said, he's retrograde about half the time, because half the time we're supposed to be committing to our efforts, which is when Saturn is moving forward, we're like, okay, this is what I'm committed to. This is what I'm concentrating on. And then he starts to slow down, like he's been stationary retrograde for about a month. He'll kind of stop in the sky before he starts to move backwards. He doesn't move at all. I talked about this in the June forecast, if you remember. If you saw my June forecast, if you didn't, watch it, because I talked about Saturn station for the whole month and then retrograde. By the way, we also just had the sun change. There's a few other things that are going on right now, but particularly this Saturn, when he stations and then goes retrograde, are the things we've been focused on and we've been committed to we feel a bit stuck. Like, now I'm supposed to be reflecting on whether or not these things that I'm committed to and that I'm concentrating on are actually worth committing to and concentrating on. We're supposed to be reflecting about half the time. Or we're supposed to be stopping and then reflecting before committing again. That's a natural process with the Saturn areas of life, right? Jupiter, again, he's retrograde about 4 months out of the year. Jupiter is about guru and teacher. You can see guru turns retrograde here. This is in September 4th. Again, September, sad to say, but 2023 is flying by. September's not that far away. It's a couple months, but 2.5 months. But again, but Jupiter will start to slow down as well. Even in August, he'll start to go stationary retrograde. And we're supposed to be reflecting on our teachings and our gurus and the wisdom and the things that are inspiring us. We're supposed to be reflecting on those things about a third of the time. It's So we're supposed to be going forward with our teachings. And then about a third of the time, we're supposed to be doing like the bird in the water. Some obstacle is going to come, and then we're going to have to put some effort into it, like the bird who wants to drink the water. If we want to drink the juice from that area of life, we're going to need to go put some effort into it. But then afterward, a lot happens because we get stronger, we get smarter, and we really test our teachings or our commitments. Again, with Saturn, it's about those long-term things that you're committed to. Now, that often shows up in things like your work and your career, your family, but it also shows up in relationships. Again, we need to be committed to that. And particularly as we get into the second retrograde, which is coming up. Again, this is July 23rd, 2023. That's in a month, a little more than a month. You see Venus turns retrograde. It'll be aspected by Saturn. It's also joined Mars. So again, Venus goes retrograde. That's where we reflect on our relationships, our agreements, our relationship agreements, the agreements we make with others, and how comfortable we feel with the compromises and trade-offs we've agreed to. The real thing to look at, though, is, again, and people have heard me say this, rather than feeling like a victim of all of your agreements, you want to be able to notice that if you've made a bad agreement, it's your fault, frankly. No one can force you to agree to something that you don't want to do. Now, I'm not talking about abuse or somebody attacks you, but I mean, mostly in your relationships with others. You can look at romantic relationships, especially, because we're agreeing to something because we want something. So to personalize it, you have an agreement with others, let's say in a romantic relationship, because you want to get that sensual pleasure, that desire. You want to engage with that beautiful thing that they evoke in you. And in order to get that beautiful thing, you need to give up something. You want something and they want something. So it's up to you to calibrate what you're comfortable with. If you give away too much of your integrity in order to have the connection, then eventually you're not going to feel good about that. And if you're not very smart, or you're not very mature, and you're not very wise, you'll just blame them for it. And then you just keep the cycle of suffering going, because you need to own your part of any agreement. And by the way, that's what Venus is. Venus is that planet that negotiates these agreements. It's not just romantically. It's between all adults. When adults are, whether they're friends, business partners, romantic partners, we all face a choice. Like, again, let's use a relationship again. Like, let's use it from my point of view. I'm a man. I see this, pretty girl, and she's not just pretty girl, but there's other things I like about her. She's this and sweet and all that stuff. Okay, let's just be extreme. I'll do anything to be connected with her. Okay. Now, again, some men they'll do anything, right? And that means, or they'll try to pretend of things, and maybe she does all kinds of things that are against my values. Let's use, for example, like, I don't drink. I don't really want to go out with any woman who drinks anymore. Not to judge them, but I just don't do it. And when people's consciousness changes because they get high or they drink or something, I just don't want to do it. And at this point, I don't care how pretty she is or whatever it is, that's the way it is. But again, that means that I'm willing to break the connection and be alone rather than compromise on this thing and then maybe resent her for it or something, where she's not doing anything. I agreed to the compromise. Now I can't sit there and try to change her. But this is what we often do with the Venus one. Well, I don't like this thing. I like this thing. I don't like this. Maybe I'll work on him and change him. And eventually, and nobody changes. You get what you get. And then again, then resentments can start to build. But again, and there's also nice ways to do that. Maybe you don't have to try to change the person, change their habits, because, and again, it's not because you think they're a bad person or whatever, but maybe you just don't want that or whatever. And you can also let them know in a very kind way, and maybe they'll change naturally. But if they don't, they don't. And again, it's the best way to handle the Venus stuff is to just be very clear within yourself first, and then express those things kindly and correctly, and realize, we're just kind of at a different point. I see that you're in that, that you like to do that and enjoy those kinds of things. That's great, right? I'm just kind of not in that thing. If we would ever even get to that, frankly, with me, I just wouldn't even go. I just wouldn't even say anything. I wouldn't even attempt. But again, that's also a kind of thing. Maybe when I was younger and I was working through those things a little bit, I would have tried and then watched and seen what happened and then kind of just sort of bowed out. But again, so this is what Venus is always doing with all of our relationships, right? With our friendships. We have to compromise something in order to get the thing that we want, which is the connection. So again, that one's coming as well. Saturn are the commitments that we make. Is this thing worth my time? Saturn is about time. Is this thing worth the hard work and effort and time I need to put into it? Right? So we're evaluating those things a lot right now because Saturn has been stationary retrograde. Then he stops and goes stationary direct. After we reflect on it and he goes stationary direct, we feel like, okay, I get it now. I want to start moving forward again with this thing after reflecting on it. That's the way Saturn feels. And again, it's about half the time. Venus is not. It's about once every couple of years. Are we really challenged to introspect and look at our relationship calibration and the thing I just told you? How well do you do that thing? Forget other people. Forget what this person did or that specific one. You're the common thread in all of your relationships and all of your relationship agreements. You're the one who has the desire, and this is why all of your relationships look similar to each other. Again, I don't mean romantically either. I mean even friendships. You have the same kind of blow-ups and triggering and compromises and stuff that you do in your friendships, but it's just not as intense. But it's the same because your Venus is doing that. It's doing all of it, right? So again, that's going to be big for, starting again at the end of July and then through through most or through all of August. We're going to have Venus retrograde and Saturn retrograde at the same time. Now you see they're out of orb, which means Saturn is already 12 and Venus is only 4 when it goes retrograde. So they're out of orb. So some people are making too much out of this because, again, in Vedic astrology, the Rashis, the signs, there's whole sign aspects and stuff like that. Again, they're going to miss each other because they're out of orb for the most part. Saturn will go retrograde back, to about, I don't remember what the degrees are. Actually, I should have looked, but I didn't. And then Venus is going to go retrograde back into Cancer, and then Venus will start moving forward again, and then the aspect will actually apply. But the reason I say this is because they're never going to hit that aspect. If they hit it before or after retrograde, then you would see them pass when they're both retrograde, but they're not. But the influence is still there, even the fact that they're both retrograde at the same time, which again, it's not that unusual because Saturn's retrograde almost half the time. But still, having both of these things happening at the same time is going to put that pressure on. While Saturn's going retrograde and you're calibrating what to commit to, Venus is going retrograde, so you're calibrating whether or not these trade-offs and these compromises and these agreements are worth it also. And Venus is going retrograde in Leo, where we're a bit fired up, and then she goes back into Cancer, where we're very emotional. So these two also are places where we can get really kind of sideways with Venus energy. So expect that to be a big theme in the middle end of the summer, again from July 23rd and then onward. So again, and then we have the next one. We have then we have Mercury goes retrograde. Now Mercury and Saturn are in orb, which means Mercury's going to pass Saturn, slow down, and then go retrograde back over the degree. So Mercury starts retrograde on August 23rd, but then he's going to pass. So Saturn and Mercury are going to go, they're going to go like this. So let's say Saturn is over here, Mercury's going to pass them and then go like that. So they're going to be doing that kind of almost like the slow car, fast car thing. So it's like Mercury's going to pass Saturn and then he's kind of going to slow down and then they're going to go the other direction, right? So that one's a much more active retrograde. Mercury retrograde is quite common, but it's still powerful for what it is. It's helping us unravel the story in our head. We're supposed to be reflecting on that story, for 3.5 weeks, every like 4 months or so. And Mercury tends to go retrograde in the sign of the same element. So he went retrograde in Sagittarius earlier this year. He went into Aries retrograde in the spring, and he goes retrograde in Leo. These are all fire signs in the summer. So again, Mercury's where we're trying to get that story straight in our head. And we have a lot of bad stories. We don't have a lot of good stories that we're believing. We're concocting a lot of stories about what things really, how things work, and we say a bunch of things that aren't really true to ourselves, to others, and we undermine our credibility this way because, again, it's better to be precise about what you know and speak the truth, not just a lot of bloviating opinions and things like that. So with Mercury retrograde, again, we're trying to get the details straight, trying to get the story straight, first within ourselves and then with others. So we can see the mistakes of our wrong thinking, of our disproportionality. And again, we can see we're in a very Mercury, especially these days with all the media, all the ideas, all the memes, all of the rhetoric and the propaganda just in the world. We're just bombarded with ideas and this and that and spin. And it's the information age, but it's mostly the misinformation age. And so how we filter through all of that is really what Mercury's about. Now, again, not just in the world, but within our own mind. What are you telling yourself about things? What is the meaning that you're deriving based on the explanations that you have? Again, it's in a big way, it's in a macro and a micro way. What are your ideas about, again, even things like relationships, because Mercury's going to pass Venus. What are your ideas about, again, Saturn, like your commitments? What are your ideas about what you believe and if those beliefs make sense? And again, it's going retrograde in Leo and it's joined the sun. By the way, this will also be combust. Mercury and Venus will also be combust while they're retrograde. But they're combust internally, not externally. So again, I break down those things in this retrograde and combust course because, again, there's a lot of what you're really looking at when you're looking at the retrograde and combustion is the spatial relationship that the planets have to the Earth. You can see this was an overview also that I did about the course. There's a course overview on that page that I set up. And again, this is applicable to really anyone who wants to understand about retrograde and combust planets, whether you're Western astrologer, Vedic astrologer, or, whichever. Because really the first thing we need to understand is the astronomical relationship of the sun, moon, and the planets involved. That's what retrograde and combustion really show. So you see Mercury has joined the sun when he goes retrograde, and he's going to go back over the sun. So all this is happening in the sign of Leo with Mercury, and it's, again, very much about the ideas we have and the story we have about our soul nature, our transcendent soul nature, not just our ego, not just our personality, but that transcendent soul nature as well. And again, those things are also really important, that we get that story straight in our head. By the way, I did just want to also let people know, I'm going to take a quick little minute pause here to let you know, in case you're not aware, that I have that, we're about halfway through 2023, but we still have a ton of time left, and there's still some amazing transitions that are ahead, particularly all these retrogrades.
Get the 2023 Vedic astrology forecast for your zodiac sign or for all 12 zodiac signs. In it, I analyze the 11 most important shifts we'll all be facing in 2023. I analyze these based on your sign, that would be your Vedic rising sign. In January, we have the big retrograde cycle of Mercury. Then in the middle of January, Saturn makes a huge shift into Aquarius for more than 2 years. Then, by the time we hit the spring, Jupiter moves into Aries, and we also have eclipses in Aries and a lot more, including Jupiter-Rahu conjunction. In the summer, Mars and Leo, along with Venus and Mercury retrograde cycles, show some major transformations for us all. At the end of the year, the lunar nodes change signs and we have eclipses and a lot more. So again, learn about what all of this means for you in 2023, or get all 12 forecasts so you can know what this means for your loved ones as well.
So yeah, my 2023 VedicAstrology.com. I wanted to bring that up because, again, this is a lot of the shifting that's happened. Because Mars goes into Leo, even that's a big shift. But then Venus goes retrograde, Mercury goes retrograde. These times we're talking about right now are really the second half of the year. We've already had like the big shifts in the first half of the year pretty much happened. But there's huge things coming for the rest of the year. Just because the year is going fast doesn't mean there isn't a lot more ahead. The big shifts at the beginning were Saturn moving into Aquarius. Again, now it's going retrograde again. But I talked about that for your sign that Saturn in Aquarius is huge for you to understand, especially within this retrograde cycle as well. Jupiter went into Aries, Jupiter joined Rahu, and we had those eclipses. The next big shifts are happening right now with not just the retrogrades, but Mars going into Leo. Again, he's been in Cancer and Gemini and Taurus for almost a year. I mean, it's been a long time that by the time he goes into Leo. And again, Mars has been very subdued, but he goes into Leo and he's ready to kick ass and take names. So we're about to have a huge shot of this like Mars and Leo energy very soon as well. And then Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde. So again, right now, and then the end of the year, like we say, we have these eclipses at the end of the year as well. So right now is a very active time to also understand the rest of 2023, even though we're not halfway there. There's still like 6 of the final 11 shifts remaining that are big for this year. So if you haven't gotten that yet for your sign, my2023vedicastrology.com is that website. So again, this takes us here. This is like the end of August, and it's not just Venus retrograde at that time and Saturn retrograde, Mercury retrograde, a lot going on. But then the final retrograde in this cycle that I'm talking about is Jupiter retrograde. By the way, this happens the day before Venus turns direct. So Venus turns direct on the 3rd, on September 3rd. The next day, Jupiter goes retrograde. So again, while that's happening, Jupiter is stationed. So when we get to the end of August, early September, again, we have a lot of this energy, this kind of energy retrograde direct with Saturn, Mercury, Venus. It was just turned direct, and then Jupiter turning retrograde. So again, Jupiter retrograde, we're reflecting on our teachings, whether they still inspire us, those kinds of things. And this, really makes a big difference. And I got to give my friend Darcy Frankel some love. She said, I love these reports. I got all 12. I should listen to them again. It's actually true. She's talking about the my2023vedicastrology.com. I'm going to put it in there. my2023vedicastrology.com. Listen, what it is, especially when you get all 12, is you can look at the people in your life and their charts and these shifts as they happen for them. Because again, what you do is you go back, you don't just listen to it once, you can take notes. But again, as we have this Mars going into Leo and this Venus retrograde, go back and listen to this because I talk about it for your sign. So like if you're a Capricorn, well, that's going to affect you completely different than it's affecting, if you're a Scorpio or if you're a Gemini, because it's different rulers and it's happening in different houses. So again, this is for $20 for your sign. It's ridiculous. And even all of the signs, again, if you don't want to just understand yourself, but you want to see what your partner is going through during that time, you can get it for their sign as well and for other people. So again, I appreciate Darcy for saying that because yeah, she gets them. A lot of people do. So, but it's very helpful to go forth and really try to understand these things and see astrology working. So again, by the time we get to the end of the year, we're going to have this Jupiter retrograde starting in early September. That's going to go into 2024. And that's a time where we're reflecting on our teachings, where we're, making sure that the things that we are aligned with still are resonant. And again, he's joined Rahu. So again, there's some tricky confusion there. But you see, Rahu is actually pretty far away at that point. Rahu is about to go into Pisces by the time we get the Jupiter retrograde. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. And it changes. Rahu changes. I believe it's late November, early December. So again, these are the big shifts at the end of the year that you can get, and you can go to that website and see. But again, I wanted to make this update here because we're here June 17th, and I could just see this pattern, the cycle of retrogrades coming these next couple months. And again, what I really encourage is people, again, I make these courses, this retrograde and combustion course, this is like, some high level teaching. I break down the astronomy of the astrology. Look, you don't hear this stuff every day. You don't learn this, okay? And then the very specific, detailed understanding of, for each ascendant, you get every planet for each ascendant, what the retrograde means for you. Again, one of the bonus classes, especially the first bonus class, is the original course that I taught on retrograde planets. Again, I taught this years ago, 6-hour course, which again, people love this class. I break down every planet for every ascendant, what the retrograde motion means based on the house rulerships and the signs. Again, very powerful. Then the bonus class 2 is the history of astronomy through the ancient world. I've been doing enormous research on this. I'm finishing a book on it. So you can really learn the history of the zodiacs, how the zodiacs were discovered by the Indians, Babylonians, Sumerians, the Greeks, up through the Persians, up through now, modern astronomers, Kepler, Tycho Brahe, the geocentric model, heliocentric change, all of this stuff, right? So again, this is powerful stuff. And again, all of that. And then there was also a bonus class where there was a Q&A. So you just click on that. And then when you click it, you can go to this page and enter the coupon 50 off retro. And you get all of that for only $47. So again, I can't do much better than that relative to teachings. I like to get these teachings in people's hands because you should understand the world you live in. You should understand the world you live in. Again, and not just the Earth. Again, we have Earth Day. We have this. What about Cosmos Day, Universe Day? That's what astrology is. That's what I'm offering here, especially with that course. Enormous value to understand. You're always going to be influenced by retrograde planets. So do you want to really learn what they are, how they work, why they work, what they are? You can do it. So this is a good opportunity to get in here and explain these things, show these things, and I hope this was helpful for you.
For a limited time, I'm offering 10 hours of masterclasses, Yoga and Vedic Astrology, Quantum Vedic Astrology, and Spiritual Astrology Masterclass. These are 3 great courses that will really help you a lot. Now, in case you don't know who I am, I taught the Astraved certification course, Dattatreya Shiva Baba, in 2010. Ravi Shankar published my book in 2018. I've been around for decades. I've been teaching these great classes, and if you go to VedicAstrologyEssentials.com, you can get this 90% off discount of these 3 great classes, more than 10 hours, guaranteed value. You can check this out. These 3 classes will give you all the necessary tools to begin to learn Vedic astrology. Please find me on YouTube at Sam Jeppy, Vedic Astrology Teacher. On there since 2007, thousands of hours of classes. Also on Facebook at Astrology Teacher, tons of articles updated regularly, and I'm on Instagram at Vedic Astrology 108, ongoing updates and interaction.